Cherie is, how would you define a DAO to someone that is just hearing this terminology for the first time? And let's start with Cherie for that one.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much, Daisy. Thanks so much to everyone for organizing and hosting this panel, for coming. The question of what is a DAO is so interesting because I guess for like wider context, there's I can actually type in the chat. There's like a DAO standards group called DAO that has been working for like 6 months to even come to a shared definition of what a DAO is. So just to like put in context, like how difficult the question is, like there's so many different floating definitions. So I kind of see that especially someone who's like relatively newer to this space as like that's my reference point. So I'm going to adapt from their definition. So they define a DAO as I guess a set of members who have cryptographic identities in some way. So usually that takes the form of a crypto wallet, and they collectively make decisions that then enforce actions that can be tracked on a smart contract in some way. So usually that takes, or very often that takes the form of flow of funds to or from a crypto treasury that like a DAO looks after, and there are multiple people in the community kind of looking after that wallet. I don't know if people here are familiar with like Snapshot, but there are a lot of tools, Snapshot probably being the biggest one, where you can use your token holdings to at least represent your weight or your support of certain decisions, like if in like a governance proposal context. So I think just like, members with cryptographic identities, some kind of like smart contract actions that represent actions that the organization takes, and then the ability to make decisions on that on-chain or using tokens in some way.
Alanna, how would you add to that in explaining a DAO in layman's terms?
Sure. Well, let's start with what it actually means. It's a decentralized autonomous organization. That's a lot of words. What does that really mean? I think Cherie, we've been trying as an industry to define our own things now that we've given them names. We're kind of working backwards a bit. But at the end of the day, a DAO is an organization that is a collection of humans currently. It could potentially extend to non-humans. That's in discussion as well with bots and other things that could be potential members. But in general, they come together under a common goal, and they govern themselves usually by consensus. And if not consensus, they have steering committees and groups that govern from around the world. And yes, they do have cryptographic identities. It's part of the charm of the DAO is that most of them have governing tokens and or security tokens.
Yeah, I think, maybe there are people hearing this that feel like there are elements of this that are intuitive to somebody coming from a journalism background. I think that there are pieces that are also pretty inscrutable, including, decentralized, autonomous, like coming to a shared definition is hard. And so I was wondering for both of you, what is it about your background, your professional background, that you feel like prepared you to be receptive to the DAO model? Or, if there was a point at which this was also inscrutable to you, what was your motivation for overcoming that and embracing this tooling?
Happy to start. I come from media. I'm responsible for much of the advertising and digital rules that we put in place when I ran advertising standards for the IAB. And so I'm very thoughtful around consensus building models. I built one of the first token weighted voting contract with a token called ad token. And that was to bring in opinions around publishers, and if a publisher was worthy or not to accrue advertising. So that experiment went forward, and I was experimenting with consensus models across the board, and I joined consensus with a Y, no pun intended. And I worked on digital identities. I ran an identity team for a long time. I did other things for them, but really at the end of the day, we were all working towards the same goal, which is how do you make decisions? How do you create groups around different topics in Web3? And Web3 is what we call, the next generation media world, which is centered around crypto. And crypto has many definitions as well, but let's call it crypto for now, and everybody will know what that means. And so Decrypt, fast forward, Decrypt was one of Consensus's portfolio companies. We just raised money, now we're by ourselves, and we formed our own DAO called PubDAO. And it's basically a decentralized wire service. And people can get paid in crypto to create content, sell content to publishers, and also commission content. So there's different avenues to have a conversation. And then we created guilds. So the governance question is really important. How do you govern a DAO? We created guilds in the DAO to govern themselves. So each job function has their own guild. So, you know, thinking about that, it just creates an easy way to create a commercial enterprise around a topic. And you can spin things up really fast and also spin things down equally fast if things aren't working.
Yeah, it's so interesting. There's so many parallels between like the ad and publishing world I just described, and I guess the beat that I've covered as a writer, which is the music industry. So my background is in freelance writing. My beat has been music and tech since 2015. And just like media and publishing, especially like the ad tech world, the music industry historically has suffered from a lot of information asymmetry, especially if you're an artist. You're trying to get access to information about like how money is flowing in the industry, just get like an overarching view of your business. Even just like that starting point is still very difficult because there are all these issues around like artists not owning their audiences, not having direct access to their fans, etc. And from the perspective of someone trying to like write about the music industry and do research and build resources for music industry professionals, in terms of what like flip the switch for me in like really being interested in a DAO as an operating model for my newsletter, Water and Music. Yeah, it's about incentivizing the breakdown of like silos and fluid information sharing. In music, I've been thinking a lot as well about like rewarding perspectives or welcoming like perspectives or like contributions that otherwise would not be valued in the traditional industry or would require you know, a very, very long like career grind of like going up the corporate ladder, say, to like to be recognized, at least in the music industry. And with DAOs at large, there very much is a culture of your like value to the organization or to the community is tied to the work that you do. It's not tied to any sense of like seniority or like clout or like abstract image. It's like very much tied to like the tangible work that you're doing and the contributions you're making. So yeah, it's a very specific music industry context in terms of how I think the industry could improve this structure. But yeah, I think it does apply to media and a lot of other industries as well.
One of the challenges that we've observed in Web3 and in DAOs specifically is when you have participants whose like minimal unit of participation is a token or an NFT or something held in their wallet, it can be difficult to communicate with them unless they are opting into another communication channel, like giving you their email address or coming into your Discord. So I wanted to ask you both, who's your membership? What is their fundamental unit of governance or participation in the DAO? And how do you communicate with them and keep in touch about important votes and other activities?
Sure. So we have a Discord for PubDAO and it's pretty active. There's different projects for different things that the teams are working on. We also have a town hall once a week and everyone joins and can have a conversation together. We also have steering committee calls. So we do have calls, we do have people come and join together to have conversations. It's not just about decentralized wallet linking, that, you know, traditional communication means are really important to get these things going, especially when it first starts. And, you know, governance is important too. So as this moves forward and grows, I mean, we just formed it a few months ago. We'll see how the communication structure grows.
Yeah, for Water Music, it's a pretty similar setup. I guess for context, I started it as a paid newsletter / membership on Patreon in 2019. And so for the first 2 years, that was the main communication channel. To this day, even with the DAO, email is like the top way that people like in the community stay posted. It's like kind of ironic that, you know, as all this tech innovation keeps happening, you know, keep, at least in like my case, keep like leaning back on emails, like the core communication channel. So yeah, there was an email newsletter. We have a Discord server. We have I guess, a digest that also summarizes activity in the community, just because also a lot of people are like overwhelmed by Discord, or like just don't have time to check it. So like definitely something we're critically thinking about. In terms of the membership, so we have like a paid subscription layer, which is just like basically all fiat. We use Memberful for that. But then we use like tokens to track contributions. But yeah, in terms of all communication, it's still happening on, you could say, like Web2 platforms. So like Discord, email, Twitter, of course, as well.
Yeah, I feel like of all the platforms I've heard discussion in Web3 about disrupting email is probably the least talked about that people want to disrupt. And I've definitely observed almost like a retreat to email in some instances as, you know, the OG communication platform. But I'm sure that there are people who are here who have their own brand or their own networks and are wondering, you know, is a DAO right for my brand? Is a DAO right for my project or my network? So I wanted to ask you both, should every brand have a DAO? What sort of key points would you use in evaluating whether the DAO structure is right for a particular project, particular community?
I can maybe start. Yeah, so I definitely do not think every brand should have a DAO. I think the nature of Web3 right now is that in like 95% of cases, what it will do is just add an increasing amount of complexity to like an operation that might already be very complex. And like for water and music, like our community is very much like a lot of like early tech adopters, people who are super into experimenting with new tech, who are already following Web3 pretty closely. That like definitely helped our, I guess, cause of transitioning to becoming a DAO, because there's a lot less friction to like, I guess, onboarding people into the concept of like having a token for a newsletter. So it's one consideration, just like, is your audience or your community like mentally, are they very, like if they're very anti-crypto, you probably should not launch a DAO. So just like thinking about, you know, general like audience considerations. And the second main thing for me, especially if you want to like launch a token that eventually will have like financial value, or that will be part of like the business model for the DAO, really, I think looking at other like culture or tech oriented DAOs that I've seen, the tokens that are the most valuable represent some kind of like ongoing interaction that is happening in the community, or like ongoing projects that are happening that are driven by the community. So even not thinking about Web3, this goes to like community design. I think like before launching a DAO, having a very thoughtful like community design framework. So like not just how will I, the brand or the person, like talk down to this community, but like how can they use this token to connect or express like value appreciation to each other, or like how can they collaborate or work together on projects and get value from each other in general in a way that will increase the value of the DAO as a whole. I think it is just like a very community driven effort, and not all brands are community driven, and that's like totally fine. So I think that's the other like main consideration, like having a community design framework set before launching a token.
Alanna?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. The whole token idea, there's tokens that are for value that are listed on exchanges, they're securities, and that's one thing. There's also just NFTs, right, that are also tokens, but are a different animal, at least from a financial perspective. There are different ways of thinking about the DAO. From a branding perspective, a lot of advertisers, and I hate the word advertiser, it's that they produce content and products as well. A lot of the luxury houses are creating NFTs, which are creating communities around their products, which is really cool. They're also accepting crypto in their stores. So I think brands and creators of things that they want to sell and or market, it's fine to create a group, call it a DAO if you want, that have an NFT pass to access other things, be it fashion shows, be it special parties, special webinars, products. So there's a Rook perfume in I think they're in London. They had a perfume DAO. It's called Scent of the Metaverse, I think. And you can join the DAO, pick the scent, and then you actually have an ownership stake in that perfume, right? Longevity, like you as that token holder, NFT holder, if there are sales of that perfume, you get a cut. There's a whole contract that you sign when you join that DAO, right? So that's an ongoing product launch that could be perpetual, right? Perpetual, at least for the next N number of years, if it goes live, right? So I think that there's different ways to think about it. I think from a brand perspective, things like that, things like access, so access is really important. We're creating a group of folks, very small group, and we bring people on trips and we bring people to different experiences. We're actually doing something in Iceland in October. We did something in Jackson Hole in March where people come and talk about this world, our Web3 world, but also talk about governance pieces and what's happening, and then also just interact with other activities outside of it. And there's an access pass for that, right? So I do think brands can engage with this, but it has to be very simple, to Cherie's point. Not security tokens.
And for both of you coming out of the world of media and advertising, obviously there's like a lot of skepticism around DAOs as well. And I think, in my experience, people who are skeptical but curious are really interested in having conversations around Web3 that, very honestly and candidly acknowledge the risks inherent in any new technology, but especially Web3. So I want to ask you what the risks are inherent in a DAO that maybe aren't inherent in other community and distribution models, and how did you account for them when you were setting up your project in your community?
Yeah, I guess I can start on this. I guess Alanna, you just mentioned like security tokens, obviously, like in terms of growing like regulatory interest in both fungible and non-fungible tokens. That's definitely a concern. That said, in terms of like, in terms of like, legal setup for the DAO, I've been like having a lot of like real-time conversations with various people to try to figure out what to do next. And like collective agreement is that like the mindset you have to enter into is that like this landscape will change completely probably in 6 months time. Like the landscape just moves super quickly. And so I think as long as you're like thoughtful and not trying to like scam people and not like making promises about like financial returns that you're not delivering, I think that like should be fine as like general consensus. But obviously regulatory risk, I don't see this as a risk. It's just like a challenge, just something you have to invest in around like onboarding communities and like introducing them to the concept of a token. In Water Music's case, like introducing people to the concept of like community governance. That's like an ongoing thing. Our team is like also still kind of adjusting to what that looks like in an editorial or like media context, and media and research context. When we first airdropped our governance token in January to a couple hundred people in our community, and like leading up to that, we needed to have like 2 months worth of weekly to bi-weekly like crypto wallet setup tutorials. Like you really do have to, you can't just like dump resources on people and be like, good luck figuring it out. Like a lot of people, because this is so complex, definitely needs a lot of like manual onboarding, just like walking through, explaining the technology, and like investing in like time/personnel to do that, I think is very important. And that definitely helped on our side. And then related to also the question of like whether or not you should start a DAO, I think the notion of like decentralizing a brand is really interesting. I think a lot of major brands at least might see that as a risk. I personally don't really, but that is definitely something to consider. So like as more and more people enter the DAO and are able to like spread the word about it, take part in the upside of the DAO, maybe through owning their token, accepting that there may be many like competing or just different frameworks in people's minds floating around for like what the brand represents, what the brand is. And so I guess like putting frameworks in place like internally to best communicate to your ability to everyone in the DAO or the community, like kind of what are we about, but just like that tension between very centralized versus decentralized brand management. I think a lot of people are figuring that out, and that could be a risk depending on like, I guess, where you're coming from.
Lawyers ruin everything. I think one of the biggest issues, and in Cherie, you're spot on, right? One of the biggest issues is that DAOs are not recognized legally in most of the US states, at least. I think it's just Tennessee and Wyoming. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But there's a couple of things. One, you are creating an organization and a corporate organization, and the liabilities of said members of the organization are in question. I think there's a test case that was filed, I think it was in May, a couple weeks ago. I think it was the BZX DAO, where someone's suing them, I think because they didn't follow up in their DeFi protocol. I think they raised 55 million, and then the members are being sued too, not just the founders, because there is that murky, like, who is liable? Because technically, and again, I'm not a lawyer at all. Technically, if you become a member of a DAO, you are in some way becoming part of the corporation. And that's where, they're going to fight it out in court and see how that shakes out. And I'm sure we're going to have to make adjustments in how we think about DAOs once that happens. I love Jeremy. He's just like posting all this cool stuff. But I think that it's a nice time to start something new, right? At the end of the day, regardless of all these risks and thinking about things in negative terms, Wyoming's done some great work. Caitlin Long, who's a great friend of mine, she did a ton of work in Wyoming on crypto in general, including initial DAO laws. I think Tennessee just took them and copied and pasted them and put them into their statutes as well, I believe, which is great. So, more to come. I do think choose your lawyers properly. There are some lawyers who don't care, and there are some lawyers who will not let you do anything. So you need to pick someone who's in the middle. And if they're telling you to incorporate in like some rando country, you should probably think about that again a little bit and think about how you need to approach your business, because those incorporations don't last long.
We have about 5 minutes left before we move to Q&A. So I wanted to give you both a chance to talk about what you feel like the greatest achievement has been for your DAO thus far and what you're most looking forward to in the space.
Biggest achievement. So also for context, yeah, so we just launched our token in January. So we're definitely very new to this journey, I think, as all of us are. A big part of a big part of our DAO model, or like why we're going on this journey, is around a more collaborative model for editorial and research for the music industry. So, incorporating more perspectives that otherwise wouldn't make it into traditional media publications. And yeah, including perspectives people who might not be in senior roles, for example, but who are still thinking really, really smartly about where the industry is going. Putting those reports together has been a huge feat. We've released 2 of those collaborative reports so far, both related to music and Web3, and we're working on one right now related to music and the metaverse. I believe the discussion right after this is about the metaverse, just try to unpack what that means. And so I think biggest accomplishment is just rallying, in this case, dozens of contributors per report to put this stuff out. And I think if you want to start a DAO, that's also almost a universal challenge, even not even thinking about the Web3 part. It's how do you coordinate and motivate people to just make stuff on a regular basis over time. I think it's general human coordination and community issue. So definitely proud that we're able to put those reports out there. Of course, in addition to launching our token and now having a substantive part of our community be part of that.
Alanna?
Yeah, so I think biggest success, I guess launching PubDAO this year, that was a great, we're super excited. We got it off the ground. We also launched a studio as well, Web3 studio, and we're focusing a lot on film funding. I think wherever music goes, people follow. Music seems to be that testing ground for new technology. one of my colleagues at Consensus did the whole Wu-Tang album deal, which is a whole in and of itself cool thing. I think that there are such interesting use cases in the culture space, maybe music, film, and so we're focused on that. I love it. I think it's an interesting. I keep saying the word interesting. I think I'm personally super excited about it to see how we can change culture with all of this technology. So we'll see. I do think I agree. The watering hole effect of all these new and shiny projects is an issue, because people will join a DAO, they'll get their tokens or NFTs, even if there's like a vesting schedule, they might get interested by something else, right? So one of the more successful, I guess, models has been the Bored Ape Yacht Club guys and gals, because they have built this community. Now they have their ape token and everything else, but they built this community around their avatars, their PFPs, right? And now they have all these things around the world. They have merch, they have everything, and they built it in the right way. We'll see how long it stays around, but what is the Wu-Tang deal? I will send you a link. It's a long conversation.
Jeremy's already on it, I'm sure.
Yeah, Jeremy. They bought the Wu-Tang album from Martin Shkreli, the finance bro, or whatever we called it. There you go. Thank you, Jeremy. So yeah, so my biggest fear is like, how do you keep attention and not have an ape? Like, what does it look like to actually do commercial work and have people stay and do it?
This is sort of combining a couple of the audience questions, but there's a couple questions here that sort of are getting at, how do you balance centralization and decentralization? When you go for total inclusion, especially in the media environment, it's more difficult to vet people, and you kind of need to account for the possibility of bad actors coming in and influencing the editorial product. So, that's one piece, but also like at the other extreme of exclusion, like, how do you set a price on membership, right? Like, how do you make it accessible for people without just making it for everyone? Cherie, is this something that you thought through when you were setting up your token and, the price and how centralized certain decisions would be?
Of course, I think about it probably like every day. Again, like a very I guess specific context to Water Music. So up until like middle of last year, it was mainly a solo newsletter run by me. Occasionally like some guest writers coming in and writing articles on music and tech, but I would always be involved editing. That's like that, and any or most writing centric newsletters, that's like as centralized of a model as you can get, like a very singular figure providing their opinion, vetting everything that goes through. So it's like an ongoing process in terms of like really clarifying what exactly is centralized versus decentralized, and even going back to like the breakdown of what a DAO is: decentralized autonomous organization. I feel like every DAO is like on a different part of the spectrum of each of those letters. Like a lot of DAOs are actually very centralized, or some are decentralized, but they're not very organized at all. It's like very amorphous. So for us, I think how we're thinking about the decentralization aspect is building out some like framework where people in our community, or anyone who like enters a DAO can propose a project or like a topic or rabbit hole they want to dive into, and then they can like build a tool or publish an article that is under the Water Music umbrella and like represents this ethos that we have of like encouraging critical research thinking and also experimentation in music and tech. So like that's kind of what we're building out right now. My current thesis is that like voice is actually like really, really hard to decentralize. And even if you not even think about Web3 for a moment, like I feel like every big metro paper at some point has an issue with this. Like, the teams are so big, but then they like somehow some article gets out that's like not in line with the voice of a lot of other articles. And like just the notion of like managing that across a bigger organization in terms of like voice and ethos is already, again, really difficult without introducing the complexity of Web3. And so in terms of like things that we put in place to make sure that we keep the voice consistent across whatever articles get published, like you still need editors who have that context. I think the main difference is that the path to becoming an editor looks a lot less traditional and a lot more fluid and a lot more open than what you might expect at a traditional media company. So that's what's the more like decentralized, or I guess like distributed aspect of the org now. So that's my current stance.
Yeah, Alanna, just for everyone, the question was about balancing centralization and decentralization, particularly around vetting people so that the experience can't be manipulated by somebody who has governance ability or partial governance ability, but also like making it inclusive, not making it financially exclusionary, really setting the right price to motivate people to be involved, but without sort of precluding a ton of people from being part of the community.
Yeah, so I'll comment on the voice comment first, because I agree wholeheartedly. That's why when we created PubDAO, we didn't just push articles into Decrypt, right? Because we knew that people who were writing articles wouldn't know how to fit into that voice. And so, we just created that wire service mentality because people didn't write, and then they could be edited by whoever purchased or ran that article. And it made it a lot easier because, yeah, unless you create a whole new publication and you say, this is for the people by the people, and it just goes and it's autonomous, that's one thing. We obviously right now, at least, are not doing that. We may in the future, right? It's not off the table, but where does the role of editor come in then? Like, how do you create truth and veracity without being checked? Governance models may help with that, but humans are also fallible. And so, voting, and I did this, by the way, with my first token, we had our first vote to vote on publishers and to include them in our whitelist for advertising, premium publishers. And guess who got kicked out first? The New York Times. I was shocked. I didn't think that was going to happen. I was like, oh. And the rationale from the group who was voting was the Judy Miller thing. And okay, like I couldn't, the tokens spoke for themselves, but, you have to be thoughtful on how you do these things, because when you have the group voting and deciding on things like that, you never know what's going to happen. And so, either you allow people to go forward and do what they want to do, or you don't. And then in terms of access, really quickly, we don't charge for access right now. I mean, eventually there might be a different conversation, but people join, they get tokens for doing things, and the tokens are utility tokens, and they can trade them for doing certain actions or whatever.
Did either of you have experience working in the co-op model, or have you considered using a co-op model for your projects? We have a question about the key differences between a co-op and a DAO, and so I was wondering if that's something that's crossed your experience before.
It's just different legal entities at the end of the day, right? I mean, you can operate a co-op in the form of a DAO, I guess, if you want to. From a process perspective, the problem with the co-op is it's very centralized, right? There's one board that runs everything. We're trying not to do that with DAOs, but in some cases it's already happening where there is a governance board. So it's like, but I don't know as much about the co-op, minus owning one in Brooklyn, the co-op model, minus the fact that like you could co-opt anything to operate on the token model.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, only thing I would add to that, definitely have considered and still considering co-op model, I guess, Water Music, long before even considering building a DAO. I incorporated it as an LLC in New York, just because that's where I was based and I was the main person running it. So definitely thinking about like other structures that are that make more sense. Yeah, I guess the only other thing I would add is, yeah, with the DAO, there are DAOs that are legally incorporated as co-ops, and I guess what the token layer allows people to do, assuming that it's liquid, is like have people come in and take part in like, I guess, a more abstracted way in the upside or growth of the community. So I guess, yeah, it depends on, I guess, the DAO member or like token holder, equity holder experience, like what kind of experience you want, how fluid of like interactions, membership, people moving in and out you want. For better or for worse, like the DAO token model is like a lot more fluid in that way.
Right, because crypto is still being treated for the most part as property, right? So you can think about that from a legal perspective. Again, not a lawyer. Anyway, so yeah, so it's an interesting question. And yes, they are incorporated as co-ops. I just feel like long term, we're going to have a whole new hybrid model for this, or a whole new construct, because we're kind of piecing together all these things and it's not jiving properly. And the lawsuits are already starting, so we'll see what comes out of all of that.
We have a question about how to join, and I think we could combine this with another question about, what is the experience start to finish of being a member? So could you walk us through how, for each of your communities, how would somebody access, in your case, Cherie, a token or an NFT at this point to participate? And then, once they join, what's that experience like on maybe a daily might be too much, but like on a weekly basis? Like what decisions could they expect to make, and how would they be communicating primarily? And yeah, I think we've touched on this a little bit, but maybe more of like a step-by-step approach.
Yeah, of course. So for us, how we've, I guess, structured our collaborative reports has so far been almost solely with people who are already within our community. So people who are paying for membership. We definitely want to open it up a lot more, but just in terms of like nailing what the collab research model looks like, it's mostly with people who are already in our community. And the way that you earn our token stream is by contributing to our research in some way. So right now the flow is we have membership NFTs that you can buy, or you can also just sign up for like the regular membership, which is $20 a month. And the main utility for that, like historically, has just been access to like exclusive research and content, because we are like a media and research company, and we provide like regular insights, mostly via email, but also on our website about like music and tech trends. And then like a small subset of that group is interested in like helping to contribute to our research. So you can help us do interviews, you can help us curate projects. We're tracking music startups all the time. So like we have like tons of Airtable databases that you can like contribute to. You can help us just do like general market research. We're in like a major outlining phase for our next collaborative report right now. And so in our Discord server, we have weekly open research calls that are open to anyone in the community, where they can jump in and like give feedback or just lurk or like contribute their thoughts or suggestions as well. So again, like very fluid kind of contribution pathways there, and like interdisciplinary. And then once like those projects go out, we do an airdrop of stream. And it's a very collaborative process in terms of determining what the token allocation is. Usually it's a mix of like the role that you played in a given project, but then also like maybe giving an extra bonus to people who did extra work in a way that isn't like properly represented in a role. So getting feedback from like project leads or people in the community around that. And then like airdropping stream, and occasionally like ETH and other like liquid forms of crypto as well, on like a per project basis. And then in holding stream, that gives you governance rights of being able to participate in like larger proposals, which are mostly at like the budgetary level. So like we want to allocate a big portion of our treasury to investing in X research project or X kind of like partnership. And those will always be put to a token vote. So that's kind of the flow for us.
This will be actually our last question. So we'll let Alanna answer, and then we have to wrap up, unfortunately.
I'm sad, this was fun. And Jeremy rocks. So I think, how do you get started? It's super easy. The PubDAO site that Jeremy posted earlier, go there. You can find different roles that you can play, writer. We're going to be adding photo soon. And people can submit content, join the Discord server. You can join your group, whatever role that you're playing. Our token's not live yet, so there's lots of questions about how do you get up and running, and what do you do, and how are you done? And we're never done, number one, because the space is so new. You can start a community quickly. We did that with PubDAO. Community comes first, in my opinion. create your Discord server, create a purpose around a topic, get those people excited, get them in there, start working even without a token. It's fine, in my opinion. And then think about how you can expand out and create your token design with the community versus like giving it to them kind of on the side. And it's an ongoing process, so you're never going to be finished, but you can at least start with that and then go forward, which is what we did. That's where we are right now, is like doing the legal stuff and finalizing everything and getting the token up and running. And so we're still in flux as well.
Thank you so much. That's really good advice. I'm going to kick it to Hillary now for our send off. Oh, Hillary, I think you're muted.
Thank you. I pinned myself, but didn't unmute myself. I want to thank the three of you, Daisy, Alanna, and Cherie, so much for the super informative session. It was really great, and great to see you all. Stick around at 3 o'clock. I will be moderating our last panel of the day, exploring the metaverse, a dystopian or utopian future. The link is in the chat. Thank you all so much. And thank you to everyone for being here, and hopefully see you in 15 minutes or so. Take care.